全球观众朋友您好，欢迎收看《世界面对面》，我是黄宝慧。美国自从今年以来，已经发生了超过240起的大型枪击案件，造成严重的死伤。而高频率的枪击案件，也让美国内部再度针对枪支管制问题掀起了激烈的辩论。这也让美国国会议员非常难得的对于枪管法修法达成了共识。但是修法的内容却似乎对于取得枪支的资格限制没有太大的帮助。到底为什么过去30年下来，美国国会始终没有办法通过重要的枪管法案呢？其实追根究底，除了民主和共和两党在枪支管制议题上的立场相左之外，拥枪团体的游说与政治现金，再加上担忧拥枪派的民意反扑，都让管制枪支至爱难行。而就经济的层面来看，枪击案频传对于美国的经济也造成了伤害，估计每年因为枪击就让美国经济损失超过8兆新台币。
全美11号举行为生命而走枪管游行集会，各大城市串联响应，民众个个举牌发声，希望做出改变。但在华府国家广场，话才说到一半，所有人拔腿奔逃，甚至还有人直接翻越围篱。导火线是疑似有枪手混入人群，结果发现是虚惊一场。但惊弓之鸟绝非一朝一夕。
We need to stop normalizing this because we are getting to a point of we're constantly getting so many different mass shootings, so many different school shootings that we're just normalizing to the point that we're just this is just a part of life.
在华府国家广场放置了4.5万个插着花的白色花瓶，45222这个数字正是2020年命丧枪下的美国亡魂，平均单日达124死亡例。
We owe the children of our country so much more than excuses for why we don't have legislation.
然而，如同抗议民众所言，美国民众正生活在枪口下的恐惧。周末彷徨的大街上，顿时间沦为疯狂逃窜的杀戮现场。
Hundreds of individuals just enjoying South Street, as they do every single weekend when this shooting broke out.
美国枪支泛滥，青少年犯罪率也跟着节节攀升。在密西根州更赫然出现年仅12岁的国中生持枪抢劫超商。
Population stands at around 330 million people, and yet a recent study found Americans own even more guns, north of 390 million.
在美国，枪比人多，恶性循环越陷越深。6月过了一半，仅6月6号这一天没有发生大规模枪击案，而2022年开始不到150天内，美国已发生248起死亡人数达4人以上的枪击事件。
America has more guns per person than Yemen, which is almost 8 years into a civil war, and all those guns aren't keeping us safe. We're the world leader in mass shootings. In fact, guns account for 79% of all homicides in America in 2020. Compare that to just 4% in the UK. Guns are now the leading cause of death among children in America.
2022年最新统计显示，枪支已超越车祸，成为美国未成年人的主要死因，正偷走孩子们的未来。
In St. Louis, a 1-year-old girl was shot during a likely carjacking, according to police. In Amarillo, Texas, an apparent road rage incident left an 8-year-old boy shot in the head.
今日的美国年轻世代已经被贴上大规模枪击一代的标签。美国研究显示，校园枪击案会对幸存者留下心理健康问题，导致学习成绩不佳。史丹佛大学一项研究发现，在发生校园枪击案的社区，20岁以下年轻人服用抗忧郁药的人数增加了21%。
When I went to the backpacks, he shot my friend that was next to me, and I thought he was going to come back to the room, so I grabbed the blood and put it all over me.
年仅11岁的瑟瑞尤是德州小学枪击案幸存者，情急之下，他抹上同柴的鲜血，在枪口下装死求生。
Do you feel safe at school? Why not?
Because I don't want it to happen again.
And you think it's going to happen again?
奥斯卡影帝马修麦康纳因为德州小学枪击案亲自前往白宫呼吁支持修法，情绪激动之余忍不住拍桌。
These are the same green Converse on her feet that turned out to be the only clear evidence that could identify her after the shooting. How about that?
人神共愤之际，校园安全捕破网。俄亥俄州通过新法案，教师只培训24小时就可携枪入校，却挨轰头痛医脚，根本搞错施力点。
The law reduces the hours of training from 700 hours to 24, and 8 annual hours of requalification training, plus yearly criminal background checks. The training would also include how to stop an active shooter, de-escalation techniques, and first aid care.
They did the quick fix. They rushed passage of a bill that's actually going to make our schools less safe, not more safe.
枪支泛滥是美国之伤，更造成巨大经济损失。统计显示，枪支暴力每年造成纳税人2800亿美元蒸发，相当于台币8.3兆。企业生产力每天减少140万美元，全美逾200企业 CEO 登高一呼，要求管制，其中包括以牛仔裤知名的服饰品牌 Levi's 执行长齐普伯格。
Daniel Defense, defending your nation, defending your home.
尽管美国参院两党罕见地达成共识，让卡关多年的控枪法案有望见到曙光，却仍难逃批评，改革幅度远远不够。
But many of those asks did not make it into the agreement currently on the table, as you see, including raising the purchase age of an AR-style weapons from 18 to 21.
目前全美有43个州允许18岁以上的人合法购买 AR-15步枪，提高枪支购买年龄，是不是就能减少犯罪？没人能保证。
To stop a bad guy with a gun, it takes a good guy with a gun.
美国政府控枪不力，尤其民主党与共和党间的常年对立，形成一道难以跨越的鸿沟。2021年统计认为枪支暴力是严重问题的，民主党多达73%，共和党为18%，而支持收紧枪支管制上，民主党高达75%，共和党则只有24%。两党瞧不拢，控枪承诺也屡屡沦为空谈。
The NRA is still very influential, not necessarily from a campaign donor standpoint. They still hand out money a lot to Republicans and make sure that their voices are heard at Capitol Hill.
与政治利益捆绑的枪支问题已经是美国社会解不开的死结。讽刺的是，因为出于对自身安全的担忧，反而激发更多民众购枪。
Yeah, we've seen a significant increase in the last week to 10 days for gun sales as a whole. We're up about 30%. There's been a significant increase in AR-15 sales. We're seeing those numbers at about triple.
We love to build great guns.
拥枪自由声浪始终不减之下，美国枪支管控常年成为烫手山芋。每枪声响起，反思后却又裹足不前，让这美式噩梦陷入轮回。无辜儿童命丧枪口的悲剧，恐怕仍会继续上演。
美国联准会 Fed 在台湾时间16日的凌晨2点钟宣布调高利率3码，基准利率升到了1.5%到1.75%，这是自从1994年以来最大的一次调升幅度，利率水准也高于2020年3月份新冠疫情刚刚爆发之前，让历经了上冲下洗的美国股市终于是拉回了涨势。联准会主席鲍尔甚至在会后记者会表示，7月可能要再度升息3码，以对抗眼前的通膨危机。而在能源和粮食价格都持续高居不下的状况之下，全球许多个国家都已经陷入了通膨的惨况。世界银行的最新经济预测报告也下调了全球经济的成长率，衰退恐怕难以避免。美国总统拜登把目前美国以及全世界面临的通膨问题归咎于新冠疫情发展不明朗，再加上俄罗斯入侵了乌克兰所造成。但是导火线其实早在川普执政时期就已经是点燃了火苗。
美股钟声声声催，敲响全球衰退警示。美国联准会的升息大锤让市场陷入恐慌，不止道琼指数13日大跳水，标普500睽违2年3个月再次落入熊市。
really simply, the S&P 500 has entered a bear market because the Fed wants it to. We've been talking about don't fight the Fed, and that's been the ethos for investors since the global financial crisis, really.
Analysts I'm talking with say yes, they want to see the Fed be more aggressive about it because that would wind up taming inflation, the very thing that is weighing on the U.S. economy. The worry, of course, is that the Fed could tighten too much and plunge the U.S. economy into a recession.
实在是因为通货膨胀已经逼得民众喘不过气，就连中产阶级都得靠超市折价券精打细算过生活。
What's up, guys? We are back at Aldi for another $10 challenge. The coupon takes off $2, leaving you to only pay 75 cents.
美国民众食衣住行涨声不断，和去年5月同期相比，不论是理发、外食、生鲜食材或汽车零件，通通大涨价，更别提为爱车加油，油表一跑，行就淌血。
COVID-19 pandemic triggered a global economic crisis that we're still digging out of. And now Putin's brutal, unprovoked war in Ukraine has created economic disruptions that are affecting the entire globe. And that's not hyperbole.
俄乌战争引来国际制裁，点燃能源和粮食战的狼烟。苟延残喘2年的疫情，迟迟未见曙光。加上中国动态清零政策冻结上海超过2个月，自己一息尚存，却硬生生砍断全球供应链，催化通膨危机。
And in comparison to surging inflation in the rest of the world, prices are cooling in China. That's because of the country's COVID lockdowns that have put pressure on factory and retail activity. Analysts say that allows China's central bank to increase stimulus to prop up the economy.
但早在川普时期操作量化宽松、大打贸易战，就埋下危机种子。如今遇上战争和病毒，效果叠加，反噬全球。
We face global challenges. We've talked about this. We're not the only country dealing with what we're seeing at the moment as it relates to inflation.
Совсем по-другому складывалась ситуация в тех же Соединенных Штатах. Вот за 2 года, неполных 2 года, с февраля 2020 по конец 2021 года, денежная масса в США выросла на 5,9 триллиона. Это беспрецедентная работа печатного станка. Общий объем денежной массы вырос на 38,6%. Но, видимо, финансовые власти исходили из того, что доллар – мировая валюта, и он, как обычно, как в прежние времена, рассосется по всей мировой экономике, и в Штатах это будет незаметно. Оказалось, что это не так.
俄罗斯总统普丁一针见血，美元作为全球流通最广货币，有贬不得的压力。钞票越印越多，汇率却更加强势，让美元的信赖度也跟着下滑。
And in 2022, when inflation is the number one issue, don't fight the Fed means tighter financial conditions, which means lower equity valuations, wider credit spreads, and a stronger dollar.
I think recession risks are uncomfortably high, and obviously they've been rising. But I think we'll be able to make our way through without actually suffering an economic downturn. It's going to feel uncomfortable at times, like today when we're seeing all this red on the screen.
世界银行最新报告预测，2022年全球经济成长率下调只剩2.9%，警告若战争迟迟无法结束，全球经济恐怕重回1970年代的停滞性通膨梦魇。
We have inflation continuing to rise, particularly in a number of advanced economies, leading to the tightening of monetary policy. So you can reasonably expect that there will be a downward revision of the growth forecast for 2022 compared to what we were forecasting only a month and a half ago.
外界担忧衰退已经来敲门，要是走上历史回头路，进入大萧条漫漫长路，后果不堪设想。回顾过往，美国在1929年面临股市崩盘、消费紧缩，当时的总统胡佛却执意展开一系列保护主义措施，高关税加上禁止移民，却只是雪上加霜，让2段衰退接连而生，全球陷入长达4年的大萧条。时隔不到100年后，这回如果无法摆脱地缘政治紧张持续升高、大国频频升息抑制通膨、新冠疫情再度反扑等风险，难保历史不会重演。
地球暖化造成了气候变迁，让极端气候轮番肆虐各国。美国的野火季往年高峰都发生在夏季，不过今年却提早在春天报道，让美国西南部的民众苦不堪言。 气象专家甚至还预测，今年美国中西部将面临着千年的大旱，农作物种植面临着严峻的挑战。而旱情在阿拉伯世界以及非洲也极度严重。为了解决无水可喝的问题，突尼西亚有新创公司开发出了能够从空气当中截取水分的机器，透过过滤冷却技术，让潮湿的空气化为干净的饮用水。而早有类似研究的美国麻省理工学院，更且和中国学界携手，开发出了成本只要4块钱美元的海水淡化设备，让资源匮乏地区的居民也能够轻松取得饮水。
浓烟笼罩半边天，遮蔽了火红烈日。夏天都还没到，美国西南部的野火已经烧遍新墨西哥、亚利桑那，甚至加州山头。海滩的蒸腾热气肉眼可见。这波热浪冲向美国第一人后，转头却又见到黄石公园逃命成灾。破纪录高温提早报道，一下雨却来者不善。无论晴雨都夹带致灾威力，暖化造成的极端气候带来实质威胁。高温的下一步就是干旱缺水。美国如今面临1200年来最严重的西部超级大旱，美西超过90%土地陷入干涸，第一波冲击农家感受最深。
So to be clear, Richard, you're getting no water, 0% from your best water source.
Correct.
What are the biggest impacts? How would you explain that to somebody outside of Hollister?
It's limiting the amount of ground that we can farm. It's limiting the amount of the intensity that we can farm.
美国如此，遑论更缺水非洲。贫瘠土壤原本就难种出食粮，干枯的收成又如何填饱众人肚皮？
After 3 failed rainy seasons, it's estimated that the region is the driest it has been in 40 years. We're now waiting for the current rainy season to arrive. It's late, and we're very concerned of what the implications will be if it is below average. The estimates suggest that the numbers affected could skyrocket to 20 million people. We need the ability to respond. We need the rain.
老天不赏脸，该怎么办？同样先天条件处于劣势，突尼西亚有新创公司找到另类解答，靠空气一滴一滴榨出水来。
هذه آلة اسمها كيوميلوس، الهدف بتاعها اللي هي تصنع لك الماء صالح للشراب من الطاقة الشمسية ومن الهواء. المبدأ اللي احنا نعاودوا ونكرروا الفينومين دو لاغوزي، الندوة بتاع الصباح. دونك شنو يصير؟ يسخن هوني، الهواء يدخل من هنايا. الباس يتعدى من الفلتر الليلي بتاع الهواء باش ينحاو منه لي بارتيكول اللي يوسخوا الهواء، ومن بعد يدخل في قلب الماكينه، وفي قلب الماكينه تنزل التمبيراتور والحراره بتاع الماء باش ينجموا نعملوا الفينومين دو لاغوزي ولا بتاع الندوه، وقتها الماء يتحل。
充满未来感的白色机器里藏着科技取水的秘密，吸取环境中潮湿空气。第一层由滤净器把关，摒除空气中的污染物质，接着进入冷却系统，再重新加热排出气体，借由冷却过程自然形成水滴，累积一定水量后，再次过滤矿化，就能形成干净的饮用水。阿拉伯世界不只缺水，更缺干净的饮用水。这间位处突尼西亚及阿尔及利亚边界的学校里，孩子得自带瓶装水上学，以免上学时补充水分却伤了身体。
حاسين الهدف ممكن باش نجم تحلهم. الحاجة الأولانية سي الأكسالو بوتابل. عندك 20% من البوبولاسيون في تونس المغرب والجزائر ما عندهمش ماء، ما عندهمش أكسالو بوتابل، دونك الماكينة دي تحطها عندهم يولدوا الماء بتاعهم. الحاجة الثانية هي الاستعمال تاع لي بوتيون بلاستيك وتنقص من الترونسبور تاع الماء، كي انت مصدر الماء تحطه بحذا المستهلك تاع الماء، ما عادش حاجتك بلا بوتيون بلاستيك لا قوارير ماء لا حتى شيء، الماء موجود بحذاك.
苹果订单不再甜了吗？iPad 主力代工厂人保在14号传出了将要退出苹果供应链。对此，人保的副董事长陈瑞聪向平面媒体反驳，完全没有这回事。但是这也让市场再次重视台湾代工厂低毛利率的问题。The newest iPad is getting thinner with improvement in efficiency. The Compo Electronics is the major OEM factory. Their orders have increased after Pegatron has quit. Moreover, they took the orders of Apple Watch the quantum computer had gave up. Rumor has it that they are leaving the Apple supply chain, which makes a huge impact on the stock price. With regard to this, Chen Ruitong, the vice president of Combo Electronics, told to the print media that that's totally nonsense. However, the low GPM is not really aligned to their policy.
电子业来讲呢，它是非常重要切入的 timing。那么对电动汽车业来讲，如果没有电子业的人进来，就失掉它应该在未来里面应该具有的功能。
Recently, the Combo Electronics have been striving to transition to the industries with high GPM, such as medical and electric vehicle industry. Also, other Taiwanese factories like Wistron and Catcher Technology quit on the Apple because of GPM. But the Foxconn still stay with its biggest client, the Apple, covering from the smartphones, laptops and tablets and so on, for the economics of scale. With high cost, it's difficult to make scale economy. Plus, there's rise in China's supply chain. Take Lakshara Precision, for example. Not only the i14 orders saw an increase, but it's also heard that the GPM of new generation of i15 high-class 3 models are estimated to be 1.5% in the next 2 years, going after Foxconn.
请他拿出一套自己的方法，而不是跟着在后面用低价、用低廉的方式。
Be not afraid of the lower price from China. There is no conclusion of whether it's good for Apple's orders. But the success of the OEM factories relies on the Apple's decision and development. 交通部抛出了55亿预算，将会在7月执行国旅补助。金华股东会本周登场，董事长潘思良却直言说，国际旅客来台卡在了繁琐的签证程序上。 国内观光业下半年恐怕会出现空窗期。
下半年对啊，有可能会有一个空窗期。
Under the severe pandemic in Taiwan, Pan Siliang cannot hold but tell the truth. Mrs. Zhang Yihui grabbed his arm and left the stakeholder meeting venue. The MOTC has announced that the $5.5 billion domestic travel subsidies will be official after July 15th. But Pan Siliang told us that the hotel industry needs a different way to handle the situation.
重症的病人也是拿感冒药，而且是事后。这个55亿如果现在来救急，其实消费者不太需要振兴。到了暑假，反正大家都会出去玩，这个是锦上添花了。
Pan Siliang said that only wage subsidies are the only effective way. People do need to be encouraged to have a trip. They will have one when it's summer vacation. If people start to go abroad and nobody will choose domestic travel, it might bring huge impact towards hotels in the central and southern Taiwan. He asked the government to lift the visa ban for foreigners so that the situation can be relieved.
这个免签这个只是跟国际接轨嘛，不要等到时候防疫都拿掉了，你结果那些还卡关，那你怎么办？我说的空窗期。 国旅完全被摧毁的空窗期就在这里。
Statistics show that the revenue of domestic catering industry is 20% less in May compared to the beginning of March due to the pandemic. The hotel cancel rate from March to May has climbed to over 30%. The sales hotel has been striving to.
我们一直在经营这个金华美食到你家的这个外带外送的业务，所以相对的，我们在餐饮营业额的衰退是比
Pan Siliang has warned that there might be a window of complete shutdown of domestic travel, not until the next year when the business get better after pandemic. The dividend of Sales Hotel Group is 12.39. They are also exploring the branches, either domestic and abroad, looking forward to bringing the business back on the trail after pandemic. 为期3天的亚洲安全会议香格里拉对话虽然已经落幕，但是美中国防部长在会议当中针对台海的议题可以说是激烈的交锋。中国国防部长魏凤和在会议当中表示，解放军不惜为台湾一战，台湾海峡属于中国，美舰不应该穿越巡逻。不过对此，美国防长奥斯汀回应， 美舰穿越台海是自由航行的权利，中国无权干涉。美国国务院发言人普莱斯在几天之后更对路透社表示，台湾海峡是公海自由区域，有航行和飞越的自由。该如何来解读这场美中日益紧绷、剑拔弩张的关系？台海是否已经成为美中冲突的风暴中心呢？对此，我们特别独家访问到了美国川普政府时期的国防部长 Mark Esper 艾斯培部长。艾斯培曾任美国国防部长以及美国陆军部长，参与川普执政时期许多非常重要的决策。我们非常荣幸能够和艾斯培越洋视讯连线，和他一起来剖析美中台关系的变化以及未来。Mr. Secretary, it's my greatest honor to have you on my show, Rebecca's Face to Face with the World. So would you like to say hi to your friends here in Taiwan, please?
Yes, hello, Rebecca. First of all, great to be with you and great to have a chance to talk with your wonderful audience.
Thank you. And firstly, let me thank you for your strong support for Taiwan. So I would like to start our interview today with a question regarding the relations between the United States and Taiwan. We all know that ever since President Biden took office, he said a couple of times when answering questions from the press that the U.S. would defend Taiwan if it was attacked by China. But then the White House immediately clarified that the U.S. policy towards Taiwan remained unchanged. Mr. Secretary, what do you make of the current U.S. policies towards China and Taiwan?
Well, first of all, I'd say that the relationship between the United States is strong and it is strengthening. It began in the last administration, the one that I served in, based on a number of things that myself and Secretary Pompeo and others had initiated. And then under this administration, I hope it will continue to grow. I was actually pleased to see what President Biden had said. I thought it was a very honest moment. I think it was a very bold statement. He said it 3 times. I don't understand why the White House has tried to clarify it or walk it back. But well, clearly we are in a different state of affairs, and I think less ambiguity is more important these days than what it was in the past.
Mm-hmm. I see. The Shangri-La dialogue just concluded, and the United States called upon China not to undermine the cross-strait stability, and the Chinese defense minister expressed right immediately that it will go to war if necessary. So how would you respond?
Well, look, we clearly see the Chinese over the past few decades, and certainly over the past several years, since Xi Jinping has come to power, using much more bellicose language with regard to Taiwan and the issues between our countries, and also using a greater display of military force. So we know, the incursions that are happening on a near daily basis by the Chinese Air Force or the PLA Navy into Taiwan airspace or naval space. It continues to grow, and this language that he uses is very problematic. It is a deviation from what we had agreed upon many years ago, going back to the Taiwan Relations Act, and it shows it shows the real what's behind the Chinese intentions with regard to this matter, and it's why we need to stand firm against Chinese aggression.
So. We are both alumni of the Kennedy School of Government, Harvard University, and our esteemed professor, Graham Allison, wrote about the Thucydides trap, which means when a great power's position as hegemony is threatened by an emerging power, there is a significant likelihood of war between the two powers. Do you think the United States and China will go to war eventually, and can the war be prevented, and how?
Well, it may be likely, but it's not inevitable. And so I think, look, China is clearly on the rise. We've seen the growth in many different ways, and they are an ascending power, and that's fine. But they need to do so within the international rules that exist and the laws and the norms and expectations of governments around the world. So what we're talking about now is not just about China's rise, but its rise within the democratic framework established in the wake of World War II. So we need to accommodate that rise. We need to work with them. We hopefully shape them toward a better outcome. So war isn't inevitable. That said, while we hope for the best, we need to prepare for the worst. So that means we need to strengthen our military capabilities around the world, and not just the United States, but Taiwan and our partners and allies in the region as well. And we also need to bolster our State Department, our diplomatic efforts, and do all those things that will help us compete better against the Chinese in the years ahead.
Talking about war, the war between Russia and Ukraine has continued for over 100 days. And in your view, how long will the war last? And who is likely to win the war? Some people say that Russia is now trapped in a war with Ukraine, which gives the U.S. more time to deal with China and the Indo-Pacific region. What do you make of this comment? And do you agree with that?
Well, first of all, it's been a strategic failure by Vladimir Putin on multiple fronts. I said this from day one. He's managed to unify NATO. He's managed to push Ukraine closer to the West. He's managed to get more troops on his borders, now soon to include Sweden and Finland. So it's been a strategic failure. However, at the operational and tactical level, it looks like it's grinding into a stalemate. Vladimir Putin may gain the Donbass. We'll see what happens in the coming weeks. I suspect this will last for many months, until Putin reaches the point that he decides to declare success. But that doesn't mean that the Ukrainians will accept that. They've shown a lot of courage, a lot of grit, a lot of competency on the battlefield. So, look, I think this will go on for many months. And the United States, I hope, will stand firm behind them as a democracy, just like I hope and believe we should stand firm behind Taiwan as a democracy. And look, I think there are important lessons here in this conflict for both Beijing and Taipei. And this will play out over time. I think clearly we overestimated Russia's capabilities, and hopefully it will free us up to focus more on the Indo-Pacific.
How do you see America's strategy and military deployment towards Ukraine? If you were still Secretary of Defense, what would you do? And some of the military facilities in Ukraine were provided by the United States during your term as Secretary of Defense, and you even visited Ukraine. Did you foresee the possibility of war in the region, even though back at that time, President Trump kept claiming that he had a very good relations with President Putin?
Well, we did know that there was always the possibility of an expanded conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Of course, Russia invaded Georgia in 2008, invaded Ukraine in 2014. It took Crimea and Donbass. So it was something that we were on guard against, and I give President Trump credit for providing the Ukrainians with lethal military means to defend themselves. Again, important in the context of our obligations under the Taiwan Relations Act as well. That said, my view has been that we should move NATO forces, U.S. forces specifically, closer to the Russian border, along the Baltic states, into Poland and elsewhere. I talk about this in my book, The Need to Do So. That said, I don't think we need more U.S. troops in Europe. I think we have sufficient numbers, particularly seeing the dismal performance by the Russian army against the Ukrainian. We have more than enough force in Europe. I think, again, instead, we need to focus our capabilities in the Indo-Pacific region, particularly as I describe in my book, A Sacred Oath. I believe that Northeast Asia is the greatest strategic flashpoint facing the world in the years and decades to come, whether it's on the Korean Peninsula, whether it's in the Taiwan Strait, or whether it's with Japan. Northeast Asia is the flashpoint, I think, for the world because of the great consequences that a conflict in that part of the region would impact around the world globally.
Yeah, if President Trump still were the president now, do you think the war between Russia and Ukraine could be prevented? And what do you think of the approaches taken by the incumbent U.S. government in dealing with Russia and Ukraine?
You know, the first part of that question is an unknown. So many things have happened. It's not just that President Trump left office, but Angela Merkel, arguably the head of Europe, left the world stage late last year, and other things had transpired. So we don't know what the calculations were for Vladimir Putin. You know, with regard to this administration, I think they had a slow start, a mixed start. I thought they should never take military options off the table. I thought we should provide the Ukrainians with MiG fighters and other things and other equipment much sooner. But I think at this point, we're in a better position. The West remains unified. I get concerned about the Europeans getting wobbly. And so I think the challenge here will be maintaining this coalition to support Ukraine in the months ahead and to continue to oppose Russia, both diplomatically and with sanctions. That will be the challenge.
Yeah. Mr. Secretary, you just mentioned you recently published a book titled A Sacred Oath, which reveals the shocking details while serving in the Trump administration. How was your experience working in the Trump administration in that extraordinary times?
Well, first, it was an extraordinary privilege for me to serve once again my country. I I began at the age of 18 when I went to West Point and served on active duty in the United States Army. And then, of course, in other jobs between now and then. But it was a great honor and a privilege. The job in and of itself is always with enormous challenges, dealing with both our adversaries abroad and our allies and partners. But the Trump White House made it more complicated because it was quite unpredictable and chaotic at times. And I talk about this in great detail in the book. And again, I emphasize an entire chapter I commit to the China problem that we faced and relations with Taiwan.
Yeah. What motivated you to publish this book? And have you ever faced any pressures asking you not to publish the book? And when serving as Secretary of Defense, what were the greatest difficulties you ever encountered? And were the difficulties mainly caused by President Trump?
Well, I was never asked not to publish a book. I always felt after I left office that it was important to tell this story. It was so critical to American history that I thought the American people should know what happened during this very consequential time in their history. And I think I could add an important voice to it, not just as another cabinet member, but as the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of a department that the president often turned to when he needed action, whether it was dealing with adversaries abroad, whether it was border security on the southwest border, dealing with COVID, dealing with unrest, you name it, the president often turned to us. So we had our particular challenges. I chronicle it in detail there, but I thought it's important for history for people to know and for people to learn, where I did well, where I didn't do as well, and where we made a lot of advances in terms of modernizing our military for the years ahead.
Mr. Secretary, so now comes the question. President Trump has shown his ambition to make a comeback for 2024. Mr. Secretary, if President Trump really runs in 2024 again, as a Republican, will you support him?
Yeah, well, first of all, I am a Republican, and I like to describe myself as a Reagan Republican because I believe strongly in what Ronald Reagan stood for. And certainly he had an impact on my life. He had an impact on the United States at an important time of our history. And he was a great friend of Taiwan, I think, as well. So I'm a Reagan Republican. If Donald Trump runs for office again, I will not support him. I think we need a new generation of leaders who can not only advance traditional conservative policies and principles, but also do so in a way that brings people together, that is not coarse and divisive, and that can grow the Republican base in a way that will help us win elections. Look, you can have all the great policies and ideas you want, but if you can't win an election and govern, then you can't advance them. And I don't believe that Donald Trump is that person. I think there are future Republican leaders out there that can do far better. I don't believe that Donald Trump is that person. I think there are future Republican leaders out there that can do far better.
Yeah, so you will expect a new generation of Republicans to come out. So now some people have compared Taiwan to Ukraine as both countries are facing the threat from their big neighbors. Now the United States and Taiwan have maintained closer cooperation in trade and technology. What should the U.S. and Taiwan do together to prevent China's aggression?
Well, I think we need to continue to build relationships between our peoples at multiple levels, and in terms of the security aspect of it, continue to continue arms sales and training and the things that are important. I think Taiwan, of course, needs to spend more on its defense and spend more on the right things. I hope you will follow the example of Ukraine in terms of building strong, capable territorial defenses. I know that's under discussion now at the governmental level. I think that's very important. Look, the more that Taiwan can do to defend itself and make itself an unattractive target, if you will, for the Chinese, the more you will deter an incursion or some type of aggression by them. And also at the same time, give the United States and your other partners and allies time to help respond. So I think all these things work together. Those discussions should continue. And what we want to do is avoid war, and we want to make sure that Taiwan can continue to develop and along the path it's on. And it's shown to be a robust democracy with a great economy and wonderful technology and a thriving cultural aspect that we all have much to admire.
Yeah, to avoid the war. Thank you so very much, Mr. Secretary, for spending your precious times with us and your valuable points of view. And most importantly, we thank you for your strong support for Taiwan. We hope to see you very soon and read your book here in Taiwan. Thank you so much. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you, Rebecca. I look forward to it. Bye now.
Thank you.